The entire restaurant went silent when the billionaire suddenly switched to a foreign language, confident that the young waitress standing beside his table would understand nothing. He smiled as the wealthy guests around him watched, expecting her to become embarrassed and stumble away. But then the waitress answered him in the same language, calmly and flawlessly, and the smile disappeared from his face. What she said next did not merely embarrass him. It forced him to confront a part of his own life he had spent years trying to forget. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness can give people second chances and that a person's worth should never be judged by their clothes, job, or social position, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to Little Kindness Tales for more stories about kindness, courage, and second chances. It was a bright Tuesday afternoon in the heart of Billionaire City, where sunlight poured through the enormous glass windows of the luxurious Aurelia Grand restaurant. The streets outside were alive with taxis, office workers, tourists, and families enjoying the unusually clear weather. Inside, everything looked polished and expensive. Crystal glasses sparkled beneath the daylight, white tablecloths stretched perfectly across every table, and soft piano music floated through the elegant dining room. Among the wealthy customers sat a man whose name appeared regularly in business magazines, Cashin Vale, a 42-year-old billionaire known for buying struggling companies and turning them into international empires. He had arrived wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit and an expression that suggested the entire world existed to serve him. Across the restaurant, a 24-year-old waitress named Ilara Voss moved quietly between tables. She wore the restaurant's simple cream-colored uniform, her dark brown hair tied neatly behind her head, and a small silver bracelet that had belonged to her grandmother. Ilara had been working double shifts for months. Her father had suffered an accident at a construction site, leaving him unable to work regularly, while her younger brother was preparing for his final school examinations. Every extra hour Ilara worked meant another bill paid, another grocery bag carried home, and another small step toward keeping her family together. She was tired, but she never allowed customers to see it. She had learned from her grandmother that dignity was not something wealthy people could give you and poor people could lose. Dignity was something you carried inside yourself. So whenever Ilara entered the dining room, she lifted her shoulders, smiled politely, and treated every customer with the same respect. Cashin noticed her when she accidentally placed a glass of sparkling water on his table instead of still water. It was a harmless mistake, corrected within seconds, but he looked at her as though she had committed a serious offense. Ilara apologized and immediately replaced it. Cashin said nothing at first. He simply watched her walk away. A few minutes later, a group of businessmen joined his table. They were discussing an overseas acquisition involving a European technology company. Their conversation became increasingly complicated, and Cashin suddenly began speaking in French. The language flowed naturally from him, and the businessmen laughed at a private joke. Ilara approached with the main course, unaware that Cashin had noticed her nearby. Then he decided to make her the center of their entertainment. He intentionally asked for something in French, speaking quickly and using complicated expressions that most ordinary people would never understand. When Ilara looked confused for a moment, he smiled. One of his companions whispered something, and the group laughed. Cashin continued speaking, clearly enjoying the attention. His tone suggested that he believed the waitress was too uneducated to understand what was happening around her. Ilara stood beside the table holding a tray. She could feel the eyes of several customers turning toward her. She understood enough to know that Cashin was not asking about the food anymore. He was making comments about her education, her job, and the idea that someone like her belonged in a place like Aurelia Grand. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then something changed. Ilara slowly placed the tray on the service station, returned to the table, and looked directly at Cashin. Without raising her voice, she answered him in perfect French. The laughter stopped. Cashin's expression froze. The businessmen stared at one another. The restaurant seemed to become completely still. Cashin stared at her, suddenly unable to find the words that had come so easily moments earlier. But Alara was not finished. She told him that speaking another language did not make anyone superior, just as serving food did not make anyone inferior. She said that every person sitting in the restaurant had a story that could not be measured by a bank account. Then she quietly added that if he truly wanted to impress people, he should try using his wealth to make someone's life easier instead of using it to make someone feel smaller. No one laughed. Cashin's face became serious. Alara turned away and returned to work. The other customers slowly resumed their conversations, but something had changed inside the restaurant. People began looking at Alara differently. Not with pity, but with respect. Cashin, however, remained unusually quiet. For the first time in years, someone had challenged him without asking for anything in return. He watched Alara move through the restaurant, helping an elderly couple with their coats, carrying a birthday cake to a family, and patiently assisting a little boy who had accidentally spilled his juice. She never mentioned what had happened at his table. Later that afternoon, Cashin noticed something else. A small photograph had fallen from Alara's pocket near the service station. She did not notice it. Cashin picked it up and saw a picture of an older man sitting in a wheelchair beside Alara and a teenage boy. On the back was a handwritten message, "One day, all this will be better." Cashin stared at the photograph for several seconds before giving it back. He asked about her father. Alara hesitated, then briefly explained the accident and the medical expenses. She did not ask Cashin for money. She did not tell him the story to gain sympathy. She simply answered his question. That somehow made him feel worse. Cashin had spent his entire adult life believing that money solved problems. When something went wrong, he wrote a check. When someone disappointed him, he replaced them. When a company failed, he bought another one. He had built a world where almost every problem had a price. But now he was looking at a young woman who was struggling with problems money could have easily solved, yet she had never once asked a stranger to rescue her. That evening, Cashin left the restaurant without finishing his meal. The next morning, he returned. This time, he came alone. He found Alara preparing tables in the bright morning sunlight. She looked surprised to see him. Cashin apologized. Not the kind of apology powerful people sometimes give because they want a problem to disappear. This one was different. He admitted that he had deliberately tried to embarrass her because he believed his wealth gave him the right to look down on people. He admitted that he had been wrong. Alara listened quietly. Then she told him something he would remember for the rest of his life. She said that an apology mattered only when it changed what a person did afterward. Cashin nodded. That day, instead of giving Alara an envelope of cash, he asked the restaurant manager whether there was a way to help employees continue their education. He discovered that Aurelia Grand had dozens of hard-working employees who had abandoned college, language courses, or professional training because they could not afford them. Cashin offered to fund a scholarship program. But he did not put his name on it. He specifically requested that it carry the name of Alara's grandmother, the woman who had taught her that dignity belonged to everyone. Months passed. The scholarship program helped dozens of restaurant workers complete courses and earn qualifications they once believed were impossible. Alara eventually received the opportunity to continue her hospitality studies. Her father began receiving better medical care, and her younger brother earned admission to a respected university. Cashin also changed. He became less impatient with employees. He began listening during meetings instead of interrupting. He visited some of the businesses his company owned and spoke directly with workers whose names he had never bothered to learn before. People around him noticed the difference. One afternoon, nearly a year after the incident, Cashin returned to Aurelia Grand for a special ceremony honoring scholarship recipients. The restaurant was filled with sunlight again, and Alara stood at the front of the room wearing a simple navy dress, holding a certificate for completing her hospitality program. Cashin watched as she thanked the people who had supported her. When it was his turn to speak, he stood before the crowd and admitted that the most important business lesson of his life had not come from a boardroom, a financial report, or a billion-dollar deal. It had come from a waitress he had tried to humiliate. He said that he had once believed success meant being powerful enough that other people had to listen to you. Now he understood that real success meant becoming the kind of person others felt safe listening to. Elara smiled. The audience applauded. And Cashin realized that the young woman who had once stood silently beside his table had given him something no fortune could buy, the courage to become a better version of himself. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with your friends or family, and subscribe to Little Kindness Tales. Sometimes one small act of courage can change not only one person's life, but the lives of everyone around them. And before the story ends, I have one special request for you. Comment, "Kindness changes everything," below if you believe that people deserve a second chance when they are willing to change. Years later, Elara became the director of an international hospitality foundation that provided education and opportunities to young people from struggling families. Cashin remained a successful businessman, but his greatest pride was no longer measured in billions. Whenever someone asked him about the most important lesson he had learned, he always remembered that bright afternoon in the restaurant. He remembered the laughter that had suddenly stopped. He remembered the young waitress standing calmly before him. And most of all, he remembered the truth she had taught him without ever raising her voice: wealth can buy attention, education can open doors, and power can make people obey you, but kindness is what makes people remember you. Sometimes, the person you try to make feel small is the very person who teaches you how to become bigger, not in wealth, but in character. And sometimes, a second chance begins with something as simple as saying, "I was wrong," and having the courage to prove that you mean it.